Pope Urban II's call to free the holy places, issued during the Council of Clermont in 1095, spread rapidly throughout Western Christianity and was enthusiastically taken up by the feudal nobility. At the end of the First Crusade, the Christian warriors captured Jerusalem and founded the crusader states in the Orient. Their early successes were achieved mostly because of the deep political, ethnic, and religious divisions existing in the Near East at that time. Over the following 2 centuries, 8 other crusades were organized in order to defend the Latin kingdom. Welcome to our video about the Crusades. We have a 15 parts video series for you where we cover every aspect of the Crusades, from their beginning to the end and their impact in the Middle East region. So make sure to like this video, subscribe and turn on post notifications for future videos. Also, let us know in the comments below what do you think. And now back to the video. At the time of the Crusaders' arrival, the political landscape of the Middle East was extremely complex. The region was divided into emirates, often limited to a city and its surrounding territory. Prominent among these principalities were Damascus, Antioch, Tripoli, and Aleppo. While the emirs officially recognized the authority of a caliph, either in Baghdad or Cairo, they governed independently in practice. This fragmentation of power created a mosaic of semi-autonomous states, each with its own ambitions and rivalries. Political divisions were further complicated by ethnic differences. Alongside the Arab emirs, there were Turkish emirs, recent converts to Islam who had arrived in the mid-11th century. Relations between Arab and Turkish leaders were often contentious, marked by violent clashes. Another significant ethnic group were the Kurds, including the famous leader Saladin, who were Islamicized and Arabized, but not ethnically Arab. These ethnic tensions added layers of complexity to the already fragmented political landscape. Religious divisions added another dimension to the conflict. Within the Muslim community, relations between Sunnis and Shias were fraught with conflict. The Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad and most Turkish emirs were Sunni, while the Fatimid dynasty in Cairo adhered to Shia Islam. This intra-Muslim rivalry further fragmented the region. Christians, who were still a majority in the Middle East at the time, were themselves divided into numerous sects, including Copts, Melkites, Jacobites, Maronites, Nestorians, and Armenians. These diverse Christian groups had their own traditions and sometimes conflicting interests. Jewish communities also played a significant role in the region's cultural and economic life. Cities like Jerusalem, Cairo, Damascus, and Acre were home to vibrant Jewish communities, which maintained strong links with Jewish populations in the Maghreb and the West. These connections facilitated trade and cultural exchanges, contributing to the dynamism of Jewish life in the Middle East. The Crusaders, despite being united by their Latin Christian faith, were far from a monolithic group. During the First Crusade, internal conflicts frequently erupted between the Provençals and Normans. In the early 12th century, disputes over the crown of Jerusalem saw Normans and Germans at odds. Italian merchants from cities such as Pisa, Genoa, and Venice often prioritized their commercial interests over crusading zeal, leading to tensions within the Crusader ranks. Over time, the Crusaders who remained in the East began to adapt to the complex political environment. They shed some of the radicalism that had characterized the Crusade preached in Europe and started to forge alliances and agreements with Muslim leaders. Notable examples include, in 1109, Tancred, regent of Antioch, allied with Prince Ridwan of Aleppo to combat Prince Jawali of Mosul. Jawali, in turn, sought assistance from Baldwin of Edessa. This resulted in Frankish knights fighting alongside Muslims in both camps. Prior to the Second Crusade, the Emir of Damascus allied with the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem to counter the threat from the Muslims of Aleppo. During the Third Crusade, Saladin and Richard the Lionheart, while negotiating peace, even considered a marriage alliance between Saladin's brother and Richard's sister, although this plan quickly fell through. The ability to reach agreements with Muslim adversaries was epitomized by Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, who negotiated the return of Jerusalem to the Christian fold in 1229 without any fighting. However, Frederick's peaceful recovery of the Holy City was heavily criticized in the West, where waging holy war was seen as the only acceptable means of achieving such goals. On an individual level, many historical sources reveal instances of friendship, love, and mutual respect across religious and political boundaries. The autobiography of the Syrian prince Usama ibn Munkid is particularly illustrative, recounting numerous personal interactions between Latins, Turks, Arabs, and Armenians that transcended the prevailing conflicts. In the diverse and politically fragmented East, constant wars did not prevent the crossing of religious and political boundaries. Despite the overarching conflicts, individual relationships and pragmatic alliances often provided glimpses of a more complex and interconnected world. challenging the simplistic notion of a clash of civilizations. On the eve of the First Crusade, the Mediterranean basin was a vibrant and complex region, divided among several powerful entities, each vying for dominance and influence. These divisions set the stage for the dramatic and transformative events that were about to unfold. In the east, the Fatimid Caliphate, ruled by a Shia dynasty, held sway over Egypt. Despite facing numerous revolts over the previous half-century and losing control of the Maghreb and parts of Syria, the Fatimids remained a formidable force. Their wealth, bolstered by Egypt's fertile lands and lucrative trade routes, and their large fleet made them one of the principal actors of the period. Cairo, the Fatimid capital, was a bustling center of culture, learning, and commerce. To the north, the Sunni Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad theoretically controlled the entire Near East. However, the region had come under the domination of the Seljuk Turks, a formidable group of warriors from Central Asia who had embraced Islam. The Seljuks had recently seized Jerusalem from the Fatimids and were consolidating their power in Anatolia, following their decisive victory over the Byzantine Empire at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. This victory allowed them to establish a significant presence in the region, challenging Byzantine authority. Syria at this time was a mosaic of diverse peoples and religions, divided into several emirates and sultanates, including those of Antioch, Aleppo, Damascus, and Tripoli. These territories were often controlled by Turkish lords who had recently converted to Islam. Despite their shared religion, these emirates and sultanates were practically independent and frequently engaged in warfare with one another, further fragmenting the region's political landscape. The Byzantine Empire, though still a major power, was under significant threat. The defeat at Manzikert had severely weakened Byzantine control over Anatolia, and the empire found itself appealing to the Pope in Rome for assistance. These appeals contributed to the growing momentum for a crusade from the west. The Byzantines were particularly vulnerable as they faced multiple fronts. They had to contend with Norman knights in southern Italy, who had been eroding Byzantine influence since the 1030s. The Normans had also conquered Islamic Sicily, establishing a powerful feudal kingdom that was a melting pot of Greek, Latin, and Islamic cultures. In Italy, several independent city-states such as Amalfi, Genoa, Pisa, and Venice were rising as significant players in Mediterranean trade. These maritime republics maintained strong commercial ties with the ports of the Near East, facilitating the flow of goods, wealth, and ideas across the Mediterranean. Their naval prowess and economic interests would later play crucial roles in the Crusades. The Iberian Peninsula was another area of dynamic change. The collapse of the Caliphate of Cordoba had led to the fragmentation of Muslim rule into various independent emirates known as the Taifas. This fragmentation allowed the Christian kingdoms to push southwards, with King Alfonso VI of Castile capturing Toledo in 1085. However, the Christian advance was temporarily halted by the arrival of the Almoravids, a formidable Islamic force from the Maghreb who sought to reinforce Muslim rule in Iberia. Despite the conflicts over territories, islands, and strategic straits, the Mediterranean remained a crucial hub of exchange. Merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and intellectuals continuously crisscrossed the region, facilitating the transfer of goods, literature, and ideas. This constant movement enabled rich cultural exchanges and the diffusion of knowledge across different societies. The Mediterranean was a dynamic and interconnected world, where despite political and religious divisions, the flow of commerce and culture continued to thrive. As the First Crusade loomed on the horizon, the Mediterranean basin was a region of stark contrasts and profound connections. The interplay of diverse powers, cultures, and economies set the stage for the unprecedented mobilization of Western European forces towards the east, marking the beginning of a new and transformative era in the history of the Mediterranean world. To quote historian of the Crusades, Edward Peters, "In Europe itself, the news of the Crusade spread swiftly, and memories of it lasted long. To many people in the 12th century and later, it appeared to be a bridge between the heroic era of Charlemagne and their own world. The Crusades' triumphs were characterized and mischaracterized in chronicles and poems. Perhaps its deepest legacy was the sense that God had intervened unmistakably and decisively in human history once again, in favor of a sinful but chosen people. Its immediate achievements proved impossible to sustain, but its memory could be, and was. The First Crusade and its consequences touched the lives and thoughts of more people at more levels of society in more ways than any earlier event in European history." The First Crusade, initiated in 1096 and culminating in the capture of Jerusalem in 1099, was an event of monumental significance, influencing European and Middle Eastern history in profound ways. It is often recounted through the writings of those who witnessed the events, creating a narrative that seems predestined and omitting many complexities. Today, we will delve deeper into the events and figures that sparked the First Crusade, shedding light on the often overlooked details. The First Crusade's triumphal entry into Jerusalem on July 15, 1099, was marked by a bloody massacre. Crusaders slaughtered a large portion of the city's population, with many seeking refuge on the roof of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The survivors were enslaved, and the streets of Jerusalem ran red with blood. Many crusaders, having fulfilled their vow to free the holy city, returned home, leaving behind a small garrison to maintain control. By the end of 1099, only a few hundred people, all foreigners, remained in Jerusalem. Before the First Crusade, the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantium as it is commonly known, faced immense challenges. Alexios Komnenos usurped the throne of a bankrupt and beleaguered empire in 1081. His early reign was marked by battles against the Normans and Pechenegs, efforts to restore imperial authority, and delicate balancing between powerful noble families, clergy, and commoners. The Sultanate of Rum, once a Byzantine vassal, had become an independent power. In 1091, Alexios launched ambitious social and monetary reforms, and crowned his son John as his heir. However, before he could embark on a campaign to reconquer Anatolia, news of a Serbian uprising reached Constantinople. Alexios set out towards Dyrrhachium to quell the rebellion. During the journey, a conspiracy to assassinate him, involving former Empress Maria and his brother Adrianos, was uncovered. This revelation highlighted the internal instability of the empire, prompting Alexios to reconsider his plans for a large-scale campaign against the Seljuks. Witnessing the military prowess of the Norman knights, Alexios appealed to the Western courts, hoping to inspire an armed pilgrimage that would help reconquer Roman lands for more than just gold. Stories spread about Turkish atrocities against Christian pilgrims and the desecration of holy sites. The narrative, though exaggerated, depicted a dire situation that resonated deeply with Christian Europe. Pope Urban II, elected in 1088 and a staunch supporter of Gregorian reforms, played a pivotal role in mobilizing Western Christendom. Initially isolated from Rome due to conflicts with Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV, Urban toured Norman Italy, gathering support and extending friendly correspondence with Alexios. In March 1095, the Council of Piacenza saw Byzantine ambassadors join in, and Urban inspired soldiers to enter Alexios' service, promising remission of sins. Urban's grand tour of France, beginning in July 1095, aimed to secure support from key figures like Bishop Adhemar and Count Raymond of Toulouse. His journey culminated at the Council of Clermont in November 1095, where he delivered a stirring speech calling for a crusade. Although accounts of the speech vary, the message was clear: unite Christendom, end internal conflicts, and liberate the Holy Sepulchre from Muslim control. Also, the term crusade did not exist at the time, but the Pope's impassioned plea resonated throughout the Catholic West, particularly among the feudal nobility who responded with fervent enthusiasm. Contrary to popular belief, the reception to Urban's call was mixed. Nevertheless, Bishop Adhemar's commitment to the crusade inspired many. Urban's speech emphasized repentance, the cessation of internal wars, and the defense of Christian lands. The promise of remission of sins for those who died on the journey further galvanized support. The call to arms led to an unprecedented mobilization. Many nobles, driven by a mix of piety, adventure, and economic opportunity, sold their possessions to fund their journey. Urban meticulously planned the Crusade's logistics, setting the departure date for August 15, 1096, to coincide with the harvest, ensuring supplies for the Crusaders. Urban's extensive tour across France, avoiding hostile Norman and French royal territories, generated immense enthusiasm. He addressed massive crowds in cities like Le Puy, Avignon, Lyon, Poitiers, Bordeaux, Toulouse, and Carcassonne. His letters to lords and clergymen reveal a growing euphoria and urgency, as the general population embraced the idea of the crusade. The response to the Pope's call was overwhelming. Armies from various regions of Europe began to assemble under different leaders, ensuring no single region was overburdened. This decentralized approach aimed to prevent resource depletion and maintain order. The overall enterprise was placed under the spiritual guidance of Bishop Adhemar, ensuring a unified religious purpose. The First Crusade story often begins with the Council of Clermont, but the groundwork had been laid months earlier through Urban's tireless efforts. His letters and speeches inspired a movement that transcended traditional political and social boundaries, uniting a fragmented Christendom under a common cause. In the spring of 1096, a number of knights and their followers set out for the east. The initial wave of crusaders, known as the People's Crusade, was led by figures like Peter the Hermit and comprised mostly of untrained peasants. This movement, driven by religious fervor and desperation, faced significant hardships and was ultimately decimated before reaching the Holy Land. However, it set the stage for the main crusading armies that followed. As they journeyed through Europe, they committed numerous atrocities, particularly against local Jewish communities, reflecting the broader anti-Semitic sentiment of the period. By the time they reached Constantinople, the Crusaders were considerably weakened. Their subsequent encounter with the Turks near Nicaea resulted in a devastating massacre, underscoring the dire need for better organization and leadership. Meanwhile, prominent Western princes began raising larger, more organized armies. Hugues de Vermandois, the brother of the King of France, departed in mid-August 1096. He was followed by Godefroy de Bouillon, who was joined en route by many German lords. In September, Raymond de Saint-Gilles, the powerful Count of Provence, and Robert of Normandy embarked on their journeys. In October, Bohemond of Taranto, a Norman prince, crossed the Adriatic with his vassals. These various armies took several months to reach Constantinople. Hugues de Vermandois arrived in October 1096, followed by Godefroy de Bouillon on December 23rd. Bohemond of Taranto reached Constantinople on April 9, 1097, with Robert of Normandy and Raymond de Saint-Gilles arriving at the end of April. The Byzantine Emperor Alexius Comnenus, who had initially requested the Pope's help to counter the Turkish advance into Anatolia, was taken aback by the sheer size of the assembled forces, perhaps as many as 100,000 men. Negotiations over the fate of the territories to be recaptured proved challenging, as the emperor sought to maintain Byzantine interests while the Crusaders pursued their own objectives. After crossing the Bosphorus, the Crusaders achieved a significant victory by capturing the city of Nicaea in June 1097. This was followed by a major triumph over the Seljuk Turks at the Battle of Dorylaeum. However, the march through Anatolia was arduous, marked by hunger, thirst, and constant skirmishes. By the time the crusading army reached the formidable fortress of Antioch, the gateway to northern Syria, in October 1097, it was severely depleted and exhausted. The siege of Antioch was one of the longest and most grueling episodes of the First Crusade. Lasting from October 1097 to June 1098, it tested the resolve and endurance of the Crusaders. Some, disheartened by the prolonged siege, abandoned the cause and returned to the west. Despite these defections, the city was eventually taken in June 1098, just in time to repel a Turkish relief army, led by Kerboga, the Lord of Mosul. Following the capture of Antioch, the Crusaders paused to regroup, replenish their supplies, and plunder the surrounding towns. This interlude provided a much-needed respite before they resumed their advance towards Jerusalem. In January 1099, the Crusaders set out once more, traversing the challenging terrain of Syria and Palestine. They finally reached the walls of Jerusalem on June 7, 1099. The culmination of the First Crusade was the dramatic siege and capture of Jerusalem in 1099. The final assault on the city, marked by intense fighting and a brutal massacre, fulfilled the Crusaders' vow to liberate the Holy City. The aftermath saw the establishment of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, with Godfrey of Bouillon elected as its ruler, taking the title, Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. We will cover the Siege of Jerusalem in our next video, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. In the aftermath of Jerusalem's capture, many Crusaders considered their mission complete and returned home, having achieved what they believed to be a divinely ordained goal. Those who remained established the Kingdom of Jerusalem and other Crusader states, setting the stage for further conflicts and the continued presence of Western powers in the Levant. The establishment of Latin rule in Jerusalem led to significant changes in the city's governance and religious landscape. The Franks built and restored numerous churches, most notably the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They also transformed the Temple Mount, converting the Dome of the Rock into the Templum Domini, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque into the headquarters of the Knights Templar. The First Crusade's legacy extended far beyond its immediate achievements. It left an indelible mark on European and Middle Eastern history, shaping the geopolitical, cultural, and religious dynamics for centuries. The idea of crusading continued to inspire subsequent generations, leading to additional expeditions and the establishment of Crusader states. Edward Peters aptly summarizes the profound impact of the First Crusade. Its immediate achievements proved impossible to sustain, but its memory could be and was. The sense of divine intervention and the notion of a holy mission resonated deeply with medieval society, influencing literature, art, and collective memory. On June 6, 1099, after 3 arduous years marked by famine, plagues, and desertions, the Crusaders finally glimpsed the rich domes and high towers of Jerusalem on the horizon. For many, the sight was overwhelming, evoking tears of disbelief and joy. Their extraordinary journey, inspired by Pope Urban II's call to arms, had reached its climax. The Siege of Jerusalem, a pivotal event that would heavily influence medieval European history, was about to commence. The path to Jerusalem had been fraught with challenges. The First Crusade began in 1096, following Pope Urban II's impassioned plea at the Council of Clermont in 1095. Urban's call for a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control resonated deeply across Europe. Thousands of knights, nobles, and commoners answered the call, leaving their homes and embarking on a perilous journey to the Holy Land. In the weeks leading up to the siege, the Crusaders had experienced a miraculous victory over a Turkish relief force near Antioch. The Siege of Antioch, which lasted from October 1097 to June 1098, was one of the most grueling and significant battles of the First Crusade. The city of Antioch, with its formidable walls and strategic location, was a crucial objective for the Crusaders. Capturing it would secure a vital supply line and provide a base for further operations in the region. The siege was marked by extreme hardship. The Crusaders faced severe shortages of food and water, and many succumbed to disease. Morale plummeted, and desertions were common. Despite these challenges, the Crusaders managed to breach the city's walls in June 1098, thanks in part to the treachery of an Armenian guard who opened a gate to the besiegers. However, their victory was short-lived. Shortly after capturing Antioch, the Crusaders found themselves besieged by a large Muslim army led by Kerboga of Mosul. Trapped within the city, they faced the prospect of annihilation. In this desperate situation, a priest named Peter Bartholomew claimed to have discovered the Holy Lance, the spear that had pierced Christ's side, in the city's cathedral. This relic boosted the Crusaders' morale, and they launched a daring sortie against Kerboga's forces. Against all odds, they defeated the besieging army, securing their hold on Antioch. Despite their victory, the months following the capture of Antioch were fraught with challenges. The Crusaders lingered in the city, beset by several factors. The harsh summer heat made marching through the arid lands south of Antioch unappealing, especially for the poor participants who would suffer the most. Additionally, a plague descended on the city, weakening Count Raymond's health and claiming the life of the papal legate, Adhemar le Puy. Adhemar's death was a significant blow, as the cool-headed bishop often mediated the endless quarrels between the Frankish lords. The loss of Adhemar undermined the already fragile cooperation among the Crusader leaders, particularly between Raymond and Bohemond, who still quarreled over the fate of Antioch. Bohemond, having titled himself Prince of Antioch and secured the citadel, refused to continue the expedition. Despite Raymond's efforts to convince him to abandon his personal ambitions, including appealing to Emperor Alexios to reclaim the city, Bohemond remained resolute. The Crusades stalled, with only the notable capture of Marat in December breaking the months of inactivity. Unrest grew among the lower-ranked knights and officers, who threatened to tear down the walls of Antioch if the crusade did not resume. This pressure forced Raymond and Godfrey to march out in mid-January 1099, leaving Bohemond free to establish his new domain. As the Crusaders marched south along the coast, they encountered little resistance. Many petty emirs chose to pay tribute rather than fight, understanding that the Crusaders' primary goal was to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim hands, not total conquest. When the Latin army besieged Antioch in 1098, the Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt had captured Jerusalem and its surroundings. Consequently, the Seljuk Turks, at war with the Fatimids, showed little interest in stopping the Crusaders. After 5 relatively easy months traveling through Palestine, the Crusaders reached the port city of Jaffa. From there, they turned inland towards Jerusalem. News of a Fatimid army assembling in Egypt reached them, alongside reports of wells being buried or poisoned, and many trees cut down. Despite the inhospitable conditions, the threat of a relief force, and the blistering summer heat, the Crusaders pressed on, driven by the proximity of their ultimate goal. The journey from Antioch to Jerusalem was not without its own hardships. The Crusaders faced constant shortages of food and water, and the harsh desert environment took its toll. They also had to contend with the threat of ambushes from local Muslim forces. Nevertheless, their determination never wavered. They were driven by a profound sense of religious duty and the promise of eternal salvation. The Siege of Jerusalem begins. On June 7, 1099, nearly 2 years after departing Constantinople, the Crusaders reached Jerusalem and set up camps around its walls. Given the city's size, a full-fledged siege was impossible, so they divided their forces. Raymond camped on the southern wall, while Godfrey and the Normans took the northern part. Despite significant losses over the past 2 years, the Latin army still numbered around 1,300 knights and 12,000 infantry, posing a serious threat to Jerusalem. The Fatimid governor Iftikhar ad-Dawla had anticipated their arrival and prepared accordingly. The city was well supplied and defended, with a few hundred skilled light horsemen at his command to harass the invaders. To prevent a repeat of Antioch's fall due to treachery, He expelled all Christians from the city. Additionally, the Fatimids had rendered many local food and water sources unusable, forcing the Crusaders to forage at considerable distances, risking attacks from ad-Daula's cavalry. Facing dwindling supplies and the threat of an Egyptian relief force, the Crusader leaders decided to storm the walls on June 13th, a week into the siege. Lacking adequate siege equipment, with only one scaling ladder, the attack was doomed to fail. The defenders easily repelled the assault, resulting in significant Crusader casualties. The failed assault highlighted the need for a new strategy. The Crusaders realized that they needed proper siege equipment to breach the city's formidable defenses. Their morale was further bolstered by reports of visions and divine signs. One of Raymond's priests claimed to have seen a vision of the deceased Bishop Adhemar, who instructed the Crusaders to fast, do penance, and lead a barefoot procession around the walls to ensure Jerusalem's fall. In an act of desperation or extreme piety, the Crusaders followed these instructions, creating a puzzling sight for the Muslim defenders. Around this time, several Genoese galleys under merchant Guglielmo Embriaco arrived at Jaffa's harbor, bringing much-needed building materials and skilled woodworkers. The ships were dismantled and the sailors joined the siege effort. Praising God for this unexpected aid, the Crusaders constructed 2 siege towers, positioning them near the northern and southern parts of the wall. The arrival of the Genoese was a turning point in the siege. The materials they brought allowed the Crusaders to construct proper siege engines, including battering rams and siege towers. These new additions significantly boosted the Crusaders' chances of breaching Jerusalem's defenses. The Genoese craftsmen worked tirelessly, constructing the siege towers with remarkable speed. On July 13th, another assault began. Raymond led the attack on the southern wall, while Godfrey and the Normans focused on the northern perimeter. The battle raged fiercely, with both sides suffering heavy losses. During the night, Godfrey secretly moved the northern siege tower to a less defended part of the wall near the Flowers Gate. The repositioning of the siege tower was a brilliant tactical move. By targeting a weaker section of the wall, Godfrey increased the chances of a successful breach. The next day saw relentless fighting as the Crusaders continued their assault. Despite the burning of Raymond's siege tower and the collapse of his attack, Godfrey's forces persevered. After a full day and night of combat, they breached the northern wall, opening the gate for the Crusaders to flood into the city. The entry into Jerusalem was marked by fierce fighting. Crusaders clashed with the city's defenders in the streets and alleys. The defenders of the southern wall, now seeing the Crusaders inside the city, joined the fray. Allowing Raymond's troops to break through their gates, the city's defense collapsed quickly under the onslaught. The Crusaders began an indiscriminate slaughter of the Jewish and Muslim population, with little effort made by the princes to restrain their men from looting and killing. Some citizens sought refuge in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, initially guarded by Bohemon's nephew Tancred. However, once he was occupied elsewhere, the bloodbath reached the mosque as well. The Fatimid governor, Iftikhar ad-Dawla, surrendered to Raymond and was granted safe passage south. Yet few others had the opportunity to surrender directly to the noble Frankish lords. The exact number of casualties is unknown, but the streets of Jerusalem were awash with blood, and the brutality of the capture shocked even contemporary chroniclers. The capture of Jerusalem was a monumental event. For the Crusaders, it was the fulfillment of a divine mission. They had endured immense hardships, faced insurmountable odds, and triumphed. The sight of the Holy City, now under Christian control, was a powerful symbol of their faith and determination. The victory was celebrated with prayers and thanksgiving, as the Crusaders gave credit to God for their success. Almost 4 years had passed since Pope Urban II ignited the idea of a crusade to reclaim the Holy Land. The Crusaders had achieved their ultimate goal, but the story did not end there. A formidable Fatimid army, commanded by Vizier Al-Afdal, was already marching through Sinai, determined to challenge the Crusaders and retake Jerusalem. The Crusaders' victory in Jerusalem marked a turning point in medieval history, shaping the religious, political, and cultural landscape of both Europe and the Middle East. The memory of the First Crusade and its dramatic conclusion would resonate through the centuries, influencing subsequent crusades and the ongoing conflict between Christian and Muslim forces in the region. In the immediate aftermath of the capture, the Crusaders set about consolidating their hold on Jerusalem and the surrounding territories. Godfrey of Bouillon was elected as the ruler of Jerusalem, taking the title Defender of the Holy Sepulchre, rather than king, in a gesture of humility and reverence for the city's sacred status. Efforts were made to fortify the city's defenses, repair damaged structures, and establish a stable administration. The Crusaders also sought to secure their position in the broader region. They launched military expeditions to capture strategic locations, including the port city of Ascalon. These efforts were crucial in maintaining supply lines and ensuring the continued flow of reinforcements and resources from Europe. The Battle of Ascalon, fought in August 1099, was the final major engagement of the First Crusade. The Fatimid Vizier Al-Afdal had assembled a large army to retake Jerusalem. The Crusaders, aware of the approaching threat, decided to confront the Fatimid forces before they could launch an assault on the city. The Crusader army, led by Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, and Robert of Normandy, marched towards Ascalon. They encountered the Fatimid army near the city and engaged them in a fierce battle. Despite being outnumbered, the Crusaders fought with determination and were ultimately victorious. The Fatimid army was routed, and the threat to Jerusalem was temporarily neutralized. The victory at Ascalon solidified the Crusaders' hold on Jerusalem and marked the end of the First Crusade. The Crusaders returned to Jerusalem in triumph, bringing with them spoils of war and prisoners. The success of the crusade was celebrated with great fervor, and the leaders of the expedition were hailed as heroes. Following the capture of Jerusalem and the victory at Ascalon, the Crusaders began to establish their presence in the Holy Land. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was formally established, with Godfrey of Bouillon as its first ruler. Other Crusader states, including the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli, were also founded, creating a network of Latin Christian territories in the Levant. The establishment of these Crusader states marked the beginning of a new era in the history of the region. The Latin rulers sought to consolidate their power, secure their borders, and establish stable governance. They faced numerous challenges, including resistance from local Muslim populations, internal disputes among the Crusader leaders, and the constant threat of external invasion. The administration of the Crusader states was characterized by a blend of European feudal practices and local customs. The rulers granted fiefs to their loyal followers, established legal codes, and built fortifications to protect their territories. They also sought to foster trade and economic development, recognizing the importance of maintaining a stable and prosperous society. We will discuss the establishment of the Crusader states in our next video, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. The First Crusade had a profound and lasting impact on both Europe and the Middle East. It marked the beginning of a series of crusading expeditions that would continue for centuries, shaping the course of medieval history. The establishment of the Crusader states in the Levant created a new political and cultural landscape, fostering interactions and exchanges between different civilizations. For Europe, the Crusade brought about significant changes. It enhanced the power and prestige of the papacy, solidified the concept of holy war, and inspired a wave of religious fervor. The Crusade also had economic implications, stimulating trade and commerce between Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. The influx of wealth and resources from the Crusader states contributed to the economic development of European cities and regions. In the Middle East, the Crusade had a profound impact on the Muslim world. The loss of Jerusalem and the establishment of the Crusader states were seen as a major affront, leading to a renewed sense of unity and determination among Muslim rulers. The ensuing centuries witnessed a series of conflicts, alliances, and power struggles as both sides sought to assert their dominance in the region. The cultural and intellectual exchanges that occurred as a result of the Crusades also left a lasting legacy. European crusaders brought back knowledge, ideas, and technologies from the East, contributing to the intellectual and cultural renaissance of medieval Europe. The interactions between different cultures fostered a greater understanding and appreciation of the diversity of human civilization. The memory of the First Crusade and its dramatic events continued to resonate through the centuries. Chroniclers and historians documented the Crusade in vivid detail, often embellishing the narratives with elements of heroism and divine intervention. The stories of the Crusaders' bravery, the miraculous discoveries, and the ultimate triumph in Jerusalem became integral parts of medieval European literature and culture. The legacy of the First Crusade also influenced subsequent generations of crusaders. The successes and failures of the initial expedition provided valuable lessons for future crusades. The notion of a holy war to reclaim sacred lands remained a powerful and enduring concept, inspiring countless individuals to take up the cross and embark on their own crusading journeys. Following Pope Urban II's call to arms at the Council of Clermont in 1095, Europe became inflamed with religious zeal. The goal was clear: to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule and establish a lasting Christian presence in the Levant. Thus, the First Crusade began, and through sheer determination, bloodshed, and divine conviction, the Crusaders carved out their own footholds in the East. By the early 12th century, 4 major Crusader states had been established: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa, and the County of Tripoli. In this chapter, we will examine the events that led to the foundation of these states, their early struggles for survival, and the strategies, battles, and historical figures that shaped their formation. The First Crusade, composed of roughly 30,000 men, ventured into the unfamiliar lands of the Levant after crossing the treacherous Anatolian plateau. They soon arrived at the formidable city of Antioch, a key stronghold of the Seljuk Turks under the command of Yagi Sian, a Turkish emir. The city's strategic location on the Orontes River made it indispensable for any serious campaign toward Jerusalem. Antioch was a city of towering walls and strong fortifications. But the Crusaders, despite their dwindling supplies and suffering from hunger and disease, pressed on. The siege, lasting from October 1097 to June 1098, tested the endurance of the crusading forces. The Crusaders employed various strategies to weaken Antioch, from cutting off supply lines to attempting direct assaults on the city's walls. However, every attempt was met with fierce resistance from Yagi Sian's forces. With the morale of the Crusaders sinking, it was Bohemond of Taranto, the Norman leader, who ultimately turned the tide. Through clandestine negotiations, he bribed an Armenian guard named Firuz, who controlled a key tower on the city's western wall. On the night of June 3, 1098, Bohemond led a surprise assault, climbing the walls and opening the gates for the Crusader army. Antioch fell, but their victory was short-lived. Before they could consolidate control, the Crusaders found themselves trapped within Antioch's walls by a massive relief army led by Kerboga of Mosul. Outnumbered and besieged, the situation seemed hopeless. However, fate intervened when a monk named Peter Bartholomew claimed to have discovered the Holy Lance, the spear that had pierced Christ's side. Whether by divine inspiration or sheer desperation, this relic emboldened the Crusaders. In a daring sortie on June 28, 1098, Bohemond, Raymond of Saint-Gilles, Godfrey of Bouillon, and other leaders led their weakened forces out of the city to confront Kerboga's army. Miraculously, the Muslim forces were routed, and Antioch became the second Crusader state with Bohemond as its prince. The city's capture was a turning point, giving the Crusaders a much-needed foothold in the Levant, and positioning Antioch as a strategic center for future campaigns. While the main body of Crusaders was focused on Antioch, Baldwin of Boulogne, younger brother of Godfrey of Bouillon, embarked on a separate mission that would culminate in the establishment of the county of Edessa. As the Crusaders advanced through Anatolia, Baldwin broke off from the main army in response to an invitation from Thoros of Edessa, an Armenian ruler. Thoros, facing constant threats from the Seljuks and other Muslim powers, sought Baldwin's assistance and adopted him as his heir. In 1098, soon after Baldwin arrived in Edessa, Thoros was assassinated under mysterious circumstances, leaving Baldwin to claim the city and its surrounding territories. Thus, the county of Edessa became the first Crusader state. Although it was geographically isolated from the other Crusader states, Edessa played a critical role as a frontier buffer against Turkish incursions. Baldwin worked swiftly to secure the city's defenses, capturing surrounding towns and fortresses, solidifying his control over the region. Despite its distance from the other Crusader states, Edessa was a vital bastion of Latin Christian power. Its location on the edge of the Byzantine Empire and the Muslim world made it a target for constant attacks, but it also provided a staging ground for future Crusader expeditions into the heart of the Muslim territories. With Antioch and Edessa secured, the Crusaders' ultimate prize loomed ahead, Jerusalem. By the spring of 1099, after long delays and arduous sieges, the Crusaders, now reduced to a fraction of their original numbers, resumed their march south toward the Holy City. They faced stiff resistance along the way, but their determination never wavered. Notable victories at towns such as Lydda and Ramla bolstered their supply lines and prepared the Crusaders for the final push. The siege of Jerusalem began on June 7, 1099. The city, under the control of the Fatimid Caliphate, was heavily fortified and defended by a garrison of Muslim forces. Unlike Antioch, the siege of Jerusalem was brief but brutally intense. The Crusaders, driven by religious zeal and the hardships they had endured, assaulted the city's defenses relentlessly. On July 15, 1099, after breaching the walls, the Crusaders poured into the city. The ensuing massacre was horrific, with thousands of Muslims and Jews slaughtered in the chaos. The bloodshed shocked both the Christian and Muslim worlds, yet to the Crusaders, it was seen as divine retribution and the fulfillment of their holy mission. Godfrey of Bouillon, one of the most prominent leaders of the Crusade, was elected ruler of Jerusalem but refused the title of king, instead adopting the more humble title Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. Thus, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was born, becoming the crown jewel of the Crusader states. Under Godfrey's leadership, the Crusaders consolidated control over the surrounding region, capturing key towns like Nablus and Hebron. With the Kingdom of Jerusalem established, the Crusaders turned their attention to securing the coast and expanding their influence. Raymond of Saint-Gilles, who had played a crucial role throughout the First Crusade, embarked on a campaign to conquer the coastal city of Tripoli. His efforts were met with stiff resistance, and though Raymond did not live to see the city's final conquest, his work laid the foundations for the creation of the County of Tripoli, the Third Crusader state. Meanwhile, Baldwin I, who had succeeded his brother Godfrey as King of Jerusalem, pursued a strategy to capture key coastal cities. In 1104, with the aid of Italian maritime republics such as Genoa and Venice, Baldwin III succeeded in capturing Acre, a city of immense strategic importance. Control of Acre and other coastal cities allowed the Crusaders to secure vital supply routes from Europe and strengthened their naval presence in the region. Upon his coronation in 1100, Baldwin I set about transforming the fledgling Kingdom of Jerusalem into a powerful and stable entity. Unlike his brother, Baldwin accepted the title of king and ruled with an iron hand. Between 1100 and 1118, Baldwin IV embarked on a series of military campaigns aimed at expanding the kingdom's borders and ensuring its survival against external threats. Baldwin captured key cities such as Caesarea in 1101 and led expeditions as far south as the Sinai Peninsula, securing the kingdom's southern frontier. His capture of Acre in 1104 with Venetian assistance cemented the kingdom's control over the Levantine coast, ensuring the safe arrival of reinforcements and supplies from Europe. Baldwin's reign marked the beginning of a period of consolidation and expansion for the Crusader states. By the early 12th century, the four Crusader states were firmly entrenched in the political and military landscape of the Middle East. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa, and the County of Tripoli served as Latin Christian outposts in a predominantly Muslim region. However, their existence was precarious, as they were surrounded by hostile powers, including the Seljuk Turks to the east and the Fatimid Caliphate to the south. The Crusaders relied on a delicate balance of diplomacy, military force, and alliances with local powers to maintain their foothold. The Crusader states became a melting pot of cultures, with Latin, Greek, Armenian, and Muslim influences blending in an environment of constant tension and warfare. Despite their early successes, the Crusader states were always vulnerable to external threats. The rise of powerful Muslim leaders like Zengi, Nur ad-Din, and Saladin would eventually challenge the Latin presence in the Holy Land, leading to the decline and eventual fall of the Crusader states in later centuries. The establishment of the Crusader states was a pivotal moment in medieval history, one that reshaped the cultural and political landscape of the Middle East. The legacy of the Crusader states extended far beyond their military achievements, influencing trade, diplomacy, and the course of Christian-Muslim relations for centuries to come.